The evening began with the sound of my tires crunching over frozen Bangor snow, and for a moment I let myself believe the warmth inside my son's house was waiting for me. But the second I opened the door, a voice cut through the hallway, sharp, unguarded, never meant for me. Jason shouldn't have to carry his father-in-law someday. Sam can barely carry himself now. I stopped before the coat rack, my breath caught mid-step. Through the doorway, I saw my daughter-in-law's father setting down a bottle of wine, my son quietly gathering the broken cork he'd dropped when he heard the remark. His hands trembled as he tried to hide it. That small, shaking motion hit harder than the words themselves. I stood there, half inside the home that used to feel like mine, the cold still clinging to my coat, while warm laughter filled the room without me. A man can get used to silence, but disrespect lands fast and deep. I closed the door gently, almost carefully, the way you do when something inside you has just shifted. And right there on that frozen porch, I made myself a promise I would not let this be the story they wrote about me. The evening began with the sound of my tires crunching over frozen Bangor snow, a dry, brittle sound that stayed in the air long after the truck came to a stop. Jason's porch light spread across the driveway in a warm, steady glow. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, not quite ready to step inside. My old USPS satchel lay on the passenger seat, the leather polished smooth by years of the same route and the same routine. I should have left it at home. Maybe I brought it because it reminded me of who I still was, even when I wasn't sure anymore. The front door opened, and Jason stepped out, rubbing his arms against the cold. He called out that dinner was getting cold, and asked if I planned to sleep out there. The grin in his voice softened something in me. For a brief second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who used to sprint across the yard with stories he couldn't hold inside. I told him I was coming, grabbed the satchel out of instinct, then set it back down. Some habits need to stay outside, inside the warmth and the smell of rosemary and butter wrapped around me, the kind of scent that makes a house feel like it belongs to someone. Claire looked up from the kitchen island and called my name with her quick, bright voice. She crossed over and hugged me light and warm, then pulled back with that easy smile of hers. She told me her dad kept saying he wanted to meet the mailman, who never lost a package. I smiled because it was polite to smile, and because people like Claire believed compliments were as simple as handing someone a fresh plate. Jason hung my coat. He explained that this year would be a joint Thanksgiving, his voice steady and hopeful. I nodded, though a small part of me tightened. I wasn't jealous of the man I hadn't met yet, but there is a certain pressure that comes when two worlds lean into each other, and you already know which one has the stronger weight. In the kitchen, Claire moved between pots and pans with a kind of practiced rhythm. She talked about new recipes, about her father's restaurant in Portland, about holiday menus and guests coming in from out of state. I helped by doing the quiet work, setting out plates, moving glasses, straightening napkins more than necessary. Silence has always been easy for me. It gave other people room to fill. She said something as she checked the oven. My dad and my father-in-law, they're both good men, but they come from such different worlds. She said it casually, maybe even fondly, and she didn't look in my direction when she did. Still, the words drifted toward me and settled in a place I didn't want to name. Different worlds. I had lived my whole life in one of them, and never thought I needed another. The doorbell rang. Claire wiped her hands again and looked toward the hallway as if a current of air had shifted. Jason went to open the door. A moment later, Richard Calloway stepped in. I recognized him before he spoke. He had the presence of a man who knew his value without needing to state it. His coat hung perfectly. His gloves looked new. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never wondered if he belonged in a room. He greeted Jason with a clap on the shoulder and kissed Claire on the cheek. When he turned to me, his handshake was firm, warm, and practiced. "So you're Samuel. I've heard a lot about you. I told him it was good to meet him." He gave a small nod, the kind men use when they're acknowledging someone's existence without fully seeing them. Dinner unfolded with the predictable ease of people accustomed to polished conversation. Richard talked about restaurant expansions, real estate opportunities, the shift in coastal tourism, the economy, all the familiar notes in the familiar order. Jason laughed more than he needed to, as if trying to keep everything buoyant. Claire glowed in the comfort of her father's orbit. At one point, Jason tried to bring me in. He mentioned the winter, when I delivered insulin through an ice storm, how the storm shut down half the town, but I still made it. I shrugged it off and said it was just part of the job. Richard lifted his glass to quiet heroes. Everyone echoed the gesture with polite gratitude. I heard something hollow beneath it, like applause for a performance no one had truly watched. After a while, I stepped into the hallway. The living room noise faded into the soft hum of the house. Family photos lined the wall. Perfect lighting, perfect smiles, perfect poses. I walked slowly, letting the quiet settle. Near the front door, I heard voices. Claire was speaking softly, her tone tinged with the kind of affection people use when they want reassurance. "We're fine, Dad. We're grateful for everything you've done," Richard answered in a low voice. "I just want you two to be secure. I don't want Jason to end up having to take care of his father-in-law someday. He already has enough to handle." He said it gently, almost kindly. That made it worse. I stood still the way a man does when a truth brushes past him with no warning. It wasn't anger that hit me first. It was something quieter, sharper. A familiar shame old enough that it didn't need an introduction. I walked to the bathroom and turned on the faucet just to have a sound to fill the space around me. I looked at my reflection, the lines at the corners of my eyes, the gray in my beard, the tiredness I had grown used to. I wondered when I had become someone easy to overlook. The drive home felt longer than usual. Snow drifted across the windshield in soft waves. The heater hummed unevenly warm on one side and cool on the other. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. The roads were familiar, the curves as known to me as the back of my own hand. At a stoplight, I glanced at the satchel again. Inside it, tucked in a side pocket, was the letter with no name and no address. It had been in my possession for 2 years, a lost thing that had somehow stayed with me. I had never opened it. I told myself it wasn't my place. Tonight, it looked like something else. A message sent, but never delivered. A life drifting without finding where it belonged. When I reached home, the house met me with its usual stillness. Sarah's picture sat on the mantel, her smile lit by the soft lamp beside it. I stood there a moment, letting her presence settle over me the way it always did. She had believed I was the kind of man who never bent under pressure. I wondered if she would still believe it now. I set the satchel on the table and sat down in the old recliner. The words from Richard followed me into the room. They echoed differently in the quiet, louder, sharper. For a moment, something in me pushed back, a small spark, a reminder that silence had not always been my shield. There was a time when I had spoken with conviction, when I had fought for the things and the people I loved. Maybe that part of me had not vanished. Maybe it was only waiting. I reached toward the letter, touched the corner of it, then let my hand fall away. Not tonight. Some things need air before they reveal their meaning. Outside, a snowplow scraped down the street, metal grinding against ice. The sound lingered long after the truck had passed, a rough, tearing sound, like something old trying to break free. I sat there listening to the house breathe, and felt a shift deep inside, subtle but certain. The kind of shift a man feels only once he realizes the quiet he thought was protecting him might have been holding him in place instead. For the first time in years, I was no longer sure that silence was the safest place to stand. Morning came quietly, the kind of gray Maine morning where the sky feels a little heavier than the houses beneath it. A thin drizzle tapped against the windows as I dressed, steady and persistent. I moved slowly, not because I was tired, but because I wasn't ready to hear the thoughts waiting for me once the world woke up. When I stepped outside, the cold, damp air wrapped around me sharp enough to make my breath rise in pale clouds. I started the truck and let the engine warm, watching the mist drift across the street like it had nowhere else to be. The station was already bright with fluorescent light when I arrived. Carriers moved between the bins' voices, low the familiar shuffle of a workday beginning. I nodded to a few of them and slipped into my routine hands, sorting letters into tight stacks, fingers working with a muscle memory older than most of the people in the room. Everything felt normal on the surface, but inside there was a small tremor running under the skin of the morning. I loaded the truck and stepped out into the drizzle. Holiday lights blinked along porches, their colors softened by the moisture in the air. They should have brightened the street, but the glow felt thin, almost hesitant. I walked the first block with my head down, letting the rain settle into my shoulders, the rhythm of the route taking hold again. At Mrs. Henderson's house, I climbed the steps and placed her mail carefully in the box, tucking a plastic sleeve around the top envelope before the rain could find it. As I turned, her door opened, and she stood there in her thick cardigan, her eyes warm but sharp. "You are right on time, Sam." I told her it was nothing just habit, but she shook her head with a small smile. "You are the only person in this town I trust with anything important." She said it simply without trying to be kind, and that made it sink deeper. I felt her hand on my wrist for a moment before she disappeared back inside. The door closed softly, and I stood there a second longer, letting her words settle. Something about them pushed against the memory of Richard's quiet judgment from the night before, and the contrast ached in a place I did not know how to reach. I finished a few more blocks before circling back toward the station for midday announcements. Inside, carriers gathered near the whiteboard as the station manager held a stack of papers. His voice was steady in the way of men delivering news they didn't choose. "There is a voluntary retirement package being offered. Early option. Incentives available. Anyone interested can review the details." He passed the stack along the line. When it reached me, I held the top sheet long enough to read a few words that had too much weight for how plain they looked. Voluntary. Optimization. Incentive. It all sounded more polite than it felt. As we walked away, Mike drifted close. His voice dropped as he leaned in. "They never start with the loud ones. They look for the guys who won't make trouble." He gave a small shrug, like he wished he hadn't said it. I told him to take care of himself, and kept walking. In the restroom, I washed my hands and watched the water swirl away. When I lifted my head, the mirror offered no surprise. Same lines, same tiredness, same man. I had tried to avoid studying too closely. I looked at myself longer than usual, maybe too long. I wasn't afraid of aging, but I was starting to wonder if I had let time move through me without keeping enough of myself intact. Outside again, the rain had softened, but the ground still reflected the sky in shallow puddles. As I turned onto Bennett Street, I saw Noah in his oversized raincoat standing on his porch with his plastic mail truck held above his head. When he spotted me, he sprinted toward the fence boots, splashing voice carrying through the drizzle. "Hi, Mr. Sam." I slowed the truck and rolled the window down a little. He held up his toy truck like a badge. "Mom says you never let the weather win. I want to be like that." I told him he was already doing better than most grown-ups. His grin was wide and honest. When I pulled away, he jogged after the truck for a few steps, waving hard. His boots slapped against the wet pavement, the child version of commitment and joy in motion. The drizzle began again as the afternoon deepened. More lights flickered on along the streets. A tree glowed behind a living room window in one house early for the season, but welcome in the gloom. A woman in a blue coat hurried past with grocery bags, nodding as she slipped into her doorway. I walked my last few houses with the steady rhythm that had always anchored me. At one point, I stopped beside a mailbox that had been leaning forward for weeks, maybe months. I crouched and adjusted the bolts, tightening them with the small wrench I kept in the truck for things like this. No one saw me, but the box stood straighter when I finished, and the sight of it made something inside me feel more grounded. By the time I returned to the station, the drizzle had grown heavier again. I finished the end-of-day checks and drove home through streets washed in muted color. When I stepped inside my house, the quiet came to greet me the way it always did. Tonight, though, it felt different, not as comforting, not as familiar, more like a room waiting for an answer. I set the satchel on the table and walked to the window. The mist outside glowed under the street lamp, shifting slowly in the cold air. For a moment, Sarah's face flickered in my memory, the way she used to turn her head when she wanted me to say what I was really thinking. She had once told me that I carried more than I ever admitted. I wondered what she would say now. My hand rested on the window frame, the wood cool and smooth beneath my palm. The drizzle tapped against the glass in a soft, steady rhythm. Somewhere far off, a dog barked, and the sound faded into the distance. I stood there in the dim light, in the narrow space between who people believed I was and who I hoped I still might be, and let the quiet fill the room around me. I did not move. For the first time, the stillness felt less like a refuge and more like a question waiting for an answer. The quiet inside my house lingered longer than usual, but by Saturday, the snow on the street had already begun to thin into a pale crust. I moved through the morning without much direction, wiping down the kitchen counter, straightening a stack of bills, tightening a loose screw on a drawer that had never bothered me before. When Jason called to say Claire was making lunch and that I should stop by, his voice carried an easy warmth. Beneath it, though, I heard something gentler, as if he hoped proximity could smooth the quiet distance forming in places none of us wanted to name. I told him I would come. After the call ended, I stood still for a moment, letting the house breathe around me. Then I took my coat from the chair, slipped my gloves into my pocket, and stepped outside. The air had the sharp clarity that comes before a new snowfront, cold enough to sting, but clean enough to wake something in me. Their street was bright with winter sunlight. Bare branches caught the light like thin wires. As I turned into their driveway, the first thing I saw was a black Mercedes parked against the curb, polished enough to reflect the pattern of the trees above it. Even the tires looked freshly washed. It was the kind of car you notice whether you want to or not. I parked behind it and stepped out, shutting the door quietly, as if not to disturb something. From inside the house came the sounds of conversation light and overlapping. When I knocked once and pushed the door open, warmth pressed against my face, along with the smell of simmering tomatoes and basil. Jason came from the kitchen and smiled. "Glad you made it." I handed him my coat and followed him into the living room. The space glowed with the kind of comfort they had been building together, soft lamps. A rug, Claire had chosen new frames on the wall. A handful of relatives sat around the coffee table, leaning close to one another. Before I'd even reached the doorway, I heard a woman's voice bright with enthusiasm. "They'll be set, thanks to Claire's dad." Another voice answered with the confidence of someone stating a fact. "With him helping, they're starting miles ahead." I paused in the threshold. The room shifted when they noticed me not abruptly, but subtly, the way a conversation tightens when someone walks in, and people are unsure of what they said or how it might land. Smiles rose quickly, but I could see the small flickers in their eyes, the brief softness of pity that always hits harder than judgment. Claire stood up, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Dad," she said, "come sit. We were just talking about the house thing." I nodded and chose a chair near the edge of the room. Richard was by the window, relaxed in the armchair like it had been waiting for him. One ankle rested on his knee, his posture casual but controlled. He held a mug in one hand, the picture of comfort. "We were talking about timing," he said. "If they want something good, the window is now. Rates will move soon. They need to be ready." Jason nodded, leaning forward as if the words themselves held weight. "Claire's dad has a broker he trusts," he said. "Someone who knows the local market better than anyone." Richard took a sip of his coffee. "I told them I'll help with the down payment. There's no reason for them to struggle if I can make things smoother." Claire's face lit with gratitude. A few relatives murmured approval. Eyes drifted my way again, soft and too careful. No one asked what I thought. No one even paused to consider that I might have anything to add. It wasn't cruelty. It was the quiet assumption that my part of the story was finished. I congratulated them, said it was good news. My voice didn't crack. Years of carrying mail through storms had taught me how to speak evenly, even when things shook inside. The conversation flowed back into neighborhoods and commute times, mortgage terms, future plans. As they spoke, I let my gaze move toward the window. The reflection of the room overlapped faintly with the street outside. Beyond the glass, I saw a small splash of color. Noah was walking with his mother, bundled in a jacket far too bright for the gray weekend. When he spotted me in the window, his whole face opened into a grin. He lifted his little USPS truck high in the air, the toy wobbling in his mittened hand, and bounced once on his heels. The gesture was small, but it steadied something in me. I raised my hand just slightly enough for him to see. He waved harder, then ran a few steps before his mother caught his arm gently and guided him forward. Behind me, Richard had shifted into a story about his first restaurant investment in Portland. People laughed in the right places. Claire leaned her head on Jason's shoulder. It was a good scene, a warm scene, but I could not shake the feeling that I was watching a movie I wasn't cast in anymore. Lunch ended with plates stacked in the sink and the faint smell of garlic lingering in the air. Jason asked if I wanted to stay to watch the game. I told him I had something to take care of at home. He didn't press. He never did. Claire hugged me at the door. Her eyes were soft, honest. She said she would keep me updated on the house search. There was no malice, no intent to push me aside. And somehow that made the whole thing ache a little sharper. Outside, snowflakes drifted down slow and sparse. The Mercedes sat on the street, shining clean under the winter light. My own truck waited a few feet away, dull paint catching only a fraction of the glow. Both vehicles breathed exhaust into the same air, yet they looked like they belonged to different stories entirely. The snow thickened as I pulled away, blowing in tight swirls across the road. Soon I could barely see the taillights ahead of me. The wipers worked steadily, but the storm pressed harder, narrowing the world into a tunnel of white. A patch of ice sent the back of the truck sliding just enough to jar something in my ribs. I eased off the gas and steered toward the roadside, letting the truck settle into a strip of plowed snow. Hazard lights blinked soft amber against the falling flakes. I sat back, letting the engine idle. Snow drifted past the windshield in sweeping motions. The heater breathed warm air that fogged the lower corners of the glass. Out here alone in the storm, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt honest. I thought about the voices in that living room, the polite glances, the confidence in Richard's tone when he talked about shaping Jason's future. I thought about Mrs. Henderson's trust, and Noah lifting the plastic truck in the air like a banner. Two worlds pulling at me in different directions. The snow began to ease, the flakes growing smaller, softer. A plow roared past and cleared the road in a single, heavy sweep. When the line of asphalt grew clear behind it, I pulled back onto the road and drove home at a slow, steady pace. Inside my house, the air was still. I took off my coat and gloves. The satchel waited on the table, folded neatly, familiar in a way nothing else was. I unbuckled it and pulled out the envelope with no name and no address. The paper felt thinner than I remembered, worn at the edges. I held it in both hands as the lamp brushed a warm glow across its surface. For a moment I was ready to open it. My thumb slipped under the flap. Then something inside me hesitated, not out of fear, but out of a sense that the moment wasn't finished yet. As if the letter belonged to a different version of me than the one standing here now. I set it gently on the table. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the heater. Outside, the last of the snow drifted down in slow, steady lines under the street lamp. My reflection hovered on the window glass, blurred at the edges, a mix of shadows and soft light. I stayed there a long time, watching the snow fall, feeling the weight of the day settle. In the stillness, something inside me pressed forward, small, but undeniable, like the first step of a long walk I had not meant to take. Morning settled over the station in a dull gray that made everything look older. The parking lot still held patches of thawing snow, thin and uneven, like the ground could not decide whether to hold on to winter or let it go. I walked inside with the familiar weight of my satchel on my shoulder, a little heavier today, though nothing had changed in its contents. The manager called my name before I even reached my case. His voice had that careful softness people use when they are about to hand you something they know you will not want. I followed him into his office. The lights buzzed faintly overhead. A mug with a chipped rim sat near a stack of sorting slips. He opened a folder and slid several sheets of paper in my direction. They came to a stop at the edge of the desk, the way a breeze eases to a halt against a window. "This is the offer," he said quietly. "If you decide to take it this month, it is $15,000. The number meant less than the way he looked at me. Like he was waiting for me to nod, make everything easier for both of us. I picked up the packet, not to study it, but because leaving it there felt like a refusal I had not earned yet. The text blurred slightly as I skimmed it. Words like incentive and voluntary and transition sat on the page with a politeness that barely hid the truth. They were ready for me to go. I told him I would think about it. He exhaled as if that alone were a relief. Back at my case, the room hummed with the rhythms I had known for decades. Sorting machines, half-finished jokes, the thump of packages hitting bins. Life moving on without noticing what it might be brushing aside. I tucked the envelope into my satchel. The weight of it felt wrong, like it belonged in someone else's hands. Frank wandered over during a lull. His jacket hung loose on his shoulders, and his breath carried the faint smell of mint gum. "They gave you one," he said. I nodded. He did too, once, slow. "Figures," he murmured. "They start with the ones who do their job and keep quiet. Makes the paperwork cleaner. He met my eyes for a moment, and in that look there was a shared understanding of men who had spent their lives doing small things well and were now becoming the easiest names to erase. He went back to his route. His footsteps felt heavier than the floor deserved. When I climbed into my truck, the rain had already begun thin and steady, tapping along the roof in a rhythm that felt older than memory. I opened the Vera packet across my knees. The paper picked up the faint tremor in my fingers. I stopped pretending I did not feel it. I tried reading the first paragraph, but my eyes drifted to the windshield instead. Rain streaked down in long, clear lines, catching the light in a way that reminded me of the years I had walked these same streets without question. Snowstorms, heat waves, holidays, funerals. I had been steady, reliable. And now I was an easy checkbox on someone's list. My eyes lifted to the dashboard. Sarah's photograph sat in its usual place, the edges frayed from time and sun. Her smile still held that patient affection, the kind that said she trusted me even when I did not trust myself. I remembered something she once told me in a kitchen lit by a single lamp. Respect does not need to shout. It lasts on its own. I had believed her then. Sitting there now, I wished respect had a louder voice. I folded the papers and placed them under the seat. There would be time later, though I was not sure what later meant anymore. By dusk, I drove to Jason's house to drop off a box of old ornaments. They were Sarah's favorites, delicate pieces she had collected over years of small Christmases. I held the box carefully as I climbed the porch steps. Through the narrow opening of the front window, I heard Claire's voice floating inside, soft and warm. "The lodge is huge," she said. "Dad says the lake will be frozen by then. It will look like something out of a holiday card." Jason answered with a quiet laugh. "He always knows how to make things special." Claire said something else, her tone shifting just slightly. "I hope your dad is comfortable there." Jason paused before answering. "He will be fine. He is used to simple things. He does not need much." The words were gentle, honest, and somehow they still stung. I stood there with the box in my hands. I almost knocked. My knuckles lifted, hovered above the wood for a moment, then lowered again. I placed the box on the step where it would stay dry and turned back toward the truck. The interior felt cooler than it should have when I sat down. I rested both hands on the wheel, letting the quiet fill the space. Through the wet glass, the warm shapes of my son and his wife moved behind their curtains, soft shadows of two people, building a life that kept expanding farther and farther from the place where I once stood in the center. I watched the house for a long moment. Then the engine started with a low hum, steady and familiar. I did not pull away immediately. I took a slow breath and felt the weight of the air settle in my chest. The rain gathered into small beads on the windshield and rolled down in uneven paths. My reflection appeared faintly in the glass, blurred by the light from their living room. The night wrapped itself around me gently, not unkind, not harsh, simply there. I understood then that losing my job was only the surface. What scared me most was the quiet shift in the ground beneath my family, a shift that left me standing a little farther from the warmth each year. I put the truck in gear and eased away from the curb. The road ahead glistened under the street lamps, thin silver lines stretching into the dark. The road home felt longer that evening, even though the distance had not changed. The streetlights stretched across the pavement in thin gold streaks, bending slightly as the wind pushed at them. When I pulled into my driveway, the house waited with the same quiet. It always held a quiet that had become part shelter and part weight. I shut off the engine and listened to the soft ping of cooling metal before stepping out into the cold. Inside, the air met me with the faint chill of a house that had forgotten the warmth of a second pair of footsteps. I turned on the kitchen light and watched it settle across the counters. A few dishes sat drying near the sink. The kitchen looked clean enough, but there was an emptiness under the surface, the kind that had formed slowly over the years, without ever asking permission. I walked to the table and placed my keys down, the small clatter echoing more than it should. For a long moment, I stood there with my hands braced against the edge of the counter. I was not thinking about the Vera packet, or Richard and his lodge, or even the soft flicker of light I had seen through Jason's window. What came to mind was something quieter, something older, the shape of a memory that I had not touched in a long time. I opened the cabinet under the sink and reached for a mixing bowl, though I was not yet sure what I meant to use it for. The kitchen seemed to breathe a little the moment I set it on the table. My eyes lifted toward the top of the refrigerator, where an old tin box rested, pushed back against the wall. I had not opened it in years, maybe even longer. I reached for it carefully and brought it down. The lid resisted for a second, then gave way with a soft scrape. Inside recipe cards lay in worn stacks, edges softened by time. My mother's handwriting covered them in loops and lines that were both steady and fragile. I sifted through the cards slowly, the way someone might turn pages of an old photograph album. Near the bottom lay a small folded note that did not match the others. I almost missed it. The paper was thinner, tucked between two cards, as if it had been waiting quietly for the right moment. I opened it with the same care one would use for something delicate. You may never be rich, but you will be good, and that is enough. The words sat still on the page. Simple, unadorned, true in a way that does not fade. I did not realize I had been holding my breath until I let it out. The memory of her voice followed gently behind the words. Not a sentence, not even a clear sound. Just the familiar warmth she carried in every room she ever stood in. Beneath the note was another card. Pumpkin pie. Sarah's handwriting filled the bottom corner where she had written a few adjustments of her own. Add a little extra cinnamon on cold days. Warm the crust with your hands before rolling. Small things that had meant everything when we were young, and building a life out of thin walls and hope. I placed the card on the counter and gathered the ingredients without rushing. Flour, butter, eggs, pumpkin, sugar. The quiet rhythm of it steadied my pulse. My hands remembered more than I expected. When I began to mix the dough, the motion came naturally, as if every winter night beside Sarah had left a mark I had not seen until now. The smell of cloves filled the room when I opened the jar. Cinnamon drifted in the air in a soft cloud. I worked the dough with the heel of my hand, pressing it flat, folding it over, pressing again. A small crack formed near the edge. I smoothed it gently and felt something shift inside me. A softening, a returning. As if a door that had stayed shut for years had eased open a little. When the filling was ready, I poured it into the crust and slid the pie into the oven. Heat rushed out in a warm wave. I leaned against the counter and watched the small window in the oven door fog, then clear, then fog again in slow breaths. The kitchen smelled like years I had not allowed myself to remember. Humble winters, thin blankets, Sarah humming some tune she never finished. We survived those seasons not because we had much, but because we shared what we did have. The pie finished baking just after dusk. I pulled it from the oven and set it on the counter. Steam curled upward, thin and slow, drifting toward the ceiling. I covered it with a towel so the crust would hold its warmth. The light from the oven lingered faintly on the metal door, trembling, as if it wanted to stay longer than it should. The next morning at the station, the manager approached my case again. He kept his voice low. "Any thoughts on that packet?" I shook my head. "Not signing." He nodded once, the look of a man who had expected the answer and still felt the weight of it. As he walked away, a younger coworker passed behind me and muttered to someone near him, "Bet someone else gets that route by spring." The words were not meant for me, but they still landed. I tucked the feeling away the same way I tucked the mail into my satchel. Quietly. Without ceremony. A few hours later, when I turned onto Bennett Street, Noah came running across the small yard before I could even step down from the truck. He held a folded piece of paper, edges worn soft from being held too tight. "Mr. Sam, I made you something." He handed it to me with both hands. A drawing of a blue and white truck filled the page. A stick figure stood beside it, wearing a cap that looked far too big. Above it, he had written Mailman Sam, and underneath My Hero. His mother walked up behind him, adjusting her scarf with one hand. "He worked on that before school," she said. "He thinks the world of you." I tried to answer, but the words tangled for a moment. I thanked him as best I could. Noah grinned, proud of his work, and ran back toward the porch. I placed the drawing in my satchel, smoothing the paper once before letting it rest. Back home later that afternoon, the kitchen still carried the faint scent of the pie. I wrapped it again in a clean towel and placed it inside a box I had trimmed down to size. The crust had cracked a little along one edge, a small imperfection that made it feel more real. I slid the box onto the passenger seat of my truck and rested my hand on top of it for a moment. Outside, the light had softened into the pale shade that comes before evening. My house reflected faintly in the truck window, a small silhouette behind me. I caught my reflection too faint and blurred beside the box, as if the past and present had folded together for a brief second. The pie was small, humble, ordinary in the way only something honest can be. But it carried something Richard's expensive offerings never could. It carried the people who had shaped me, my mother, Sarah. Every winter, when heat was scarce and hope worked twice as hard. As I backed out of the driveway, the box shifted slightly, then settled again. The weight of it was so light I could have forgotten it was there. Yet somehow it felt heavier than anything else in the truck. I kept driving, letting the road open in front of me while the warmth of the pie moved slowly through the cab, its soft, steady waves. The world outside dimmed, but inside the truck the air felt touched by something I had almost forgotten how to hold. The road narrowed as it left town, and slipped into the trees, a long gray ribbon threading through pine and bare maple. The lodge sat somewhere beyond the bend, out near the lake, where the air always felt a little colder. The pie rested on the seat beside me, wrapped in its towel, breathing out a faint warmth that mixed with the smell of old upholstery and winter air. As I drove, the sky hung low and pale, the kind of November sky that makes everything look more honest. The closer I got, the more aware I became of my coat, my worn gloves, the simple box holding the pie. I imagined the cars already parked up there, polished and expensive, the way people dress their lives when other people are watching. For a moment I wondered if this would be the last year I made this drive as anything more than a courtesy invitation. The lodge appeared through the trees all at once, wide and dark against the pale sky. Stone and timber, big windows facing the lake, warm light spilling onto the porch. Several cars already lined the gravel, shining even in the weak daylight. I pulled in at the far end and cut the engine. The quiet that followed felt heavier than usual. I lifted the box carefully and stepped out. My reflection wavered in the lodge windows, small and blurred, swallowed up by the light behind the glass. For a heartbeat, I thought about setting the pie back in the truck and leaving, telling Jason I had not felt well. Instead, I tightened my grip on the box and walked toward the door. Inside, heat rolled out in a soft wave. The room glowed in shades of amber and gold. A fire burned in a stone fireplace taller than I was. Soft music floated under the hum of voices. The air smelled of roasted turkey herbs and something sweet with an edge of citrus. Lanterns hung from thick beams overhead, casting gentle light on polished wood, and framed photographs of lakes in other seasons. Claire saw me first. She crossed the room quickly, her hair pulled back, her cheeks warm from the kitchen. "You made it," she said, and her smile reached her eyes. "Let me take that." She slipped the box from my hands like it mattered, then turned toward the long dining table near the windows. I watched as she moved past platters of cheese, a turkey arranged like something from a magazine, bowls of perfectly roasted vegetables. She set my box near the end of the table by the baskets of bread and butter plates. Not hidden, but not displayed either. It looked small there, almost shy. Jason came over and hugged me in that quick, careful way he has, like he is still learning how much strength he has. "You find the place all right?" he asked. I told him the roads had been kind. He laughed and said something about the view I needed to see at sunset. Behind him, I saw Richard near the fireplace, swirling a glass of wine in one hand. A group of relatives gathered around him. His suit was dark and well cut. Everything about him looked chosen. He stepped away and crossed the room. For a moment, I watched his face, looking for any sign of what he had thought of me bringing a homemade pie into his carefully arranged lodge. "Glad you could join us," he said. "Long drive out here." "Long enough," I answered. He nodded and glanced past me toward the table. "You brought something," he said. "Just an old family recipe." He smiled polite. Then a cousin called his name and he turned back to his circle. I watched his hand move toward a tall bottle of wine on the sideboard, then hover for a second before he let it drop to his side. The moment passed quickly, but I noticed it. When it was time to sit, we all gathered around the table. Candles flickered along its length, their reflections dancing on the polished wood. The windows looked out over the lake, now a sheet of dark glass with a faint line of pale sky above it. Plates and glasses clinked as people settled in. Laughter rose and fell in little waves. I took a place near the middle, close enough to hear, but far enough that I could see the whole stretch of table. The pie had been unboxed and placed near the far end, the towel folded back to reveal its cracked, honest crust. Next to it stood 2 tall bottles of wine with heavy labels and a platter of something delicate on thin crackers. Richard carved the turkey and made a brief toast, his voice easy and practiced. He thanked everyone for coming, spoke about family and gratitude, the sort of words that float nicely over a room and then settle in whatever corner people choose for them. We ate, we passed dishes, we complimented the cook. For a while, everything felt politely warm and slightly distant. It was Claire who reached for the pie first. After the plates had thinned and the room had moved into that comfortable lull between courses, she stood and walked down the table. She picked up the knife and cut a small slice, the crust giving way with a gentle crackle. She placed it on her plate and sat back down, the steam from the warm filling curling into the air between us. She lifted her fork and took a small bite. No one else paid much attention at first. Conversations continued in pockets. Richard was saying something about a business trip to Chicago. Someone at the far end laughed a little too loudly at a story they had heard before. Then Claire went still. Her eyes closed for a second. Her hand rested lightly on the table. When she opened her eyes again, they were wet at the edges. She blinked once, surprised, and let out a soft breath. I did not know this would make me feel like this. She said more to herself than to anyone else. Jason looked over fork halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? She took another breath, steadier this time. It tastes like someone I never met, she said. Like your mother. The words slipped into the room and settled there. Conversations tapered off one by one, as if the air itself had leaned in to listen. Someone asked what she meant. Claire shook her head gently. You told me she used to bake when it was too cold, that she would make things smell warm before they were warm. This tastes like that story. Jason set his fork down slowly. He reached for the pie and cut himself a slice. I watched his face as he took a bite. At first he just chewed. Then something softened. His eyes dropped not with sadness, but with a kind of deep remembering. This is it, he said. This is exactly it. He glanced at me. Do you remember that week when the furnace went out and it was freezing, and Mom made you bake because she said the house needed to smell hopeful for a while? A few people chuckled quietly at the word. Hopeful. She stood over you the whole time, he said, smiling now. Told you to warm the dough with your hands, and to add extra cinnamon so it would feel like a blanket. The memory landed in the center of my chest with surprising gentleness. I could almost see Sarah in the narrow kitchen flower on her cheek, a dish towel over her shoulder, as she bossed me around with that soft authority she never used on anyone else. Plates began to move. First just 1 or 2 slices, then more. People reached for the pie, cutting careful wedges, passing them along. The other desserts stayed mostly untouched. The room grew quieter as people tasted. Not silent, just filled with a different kind of sound. The small noises people make when something reaches them deeper than they expected. Across from me, Richard sat with his hand wrapped loosely around the stem of his glass. The expensive bottle beside his plate was still unopened. His eyes shifted from the pie to Jason and Claire, then to the others at the table. There was something new in his expression, not defeat, not jealousy, something closer to recognition. For once he did not try to steer the moment. He simply let it pass over him. He looked at me once, brief but direct. There was no condescension in that look, no performance. If anything, there was a hint of something quieter. Acknowledgement. Maybe even a small, reluctant respect. Claire reached across and touched my hand. Her fingers were warm, a little unsteady. Would you show me how to make this? She asked. I would like to learn. I would like to keep it. Her voice caught slightly on the last word. I nodded. My throat felt tight, so I let the gesture speak for me. Her hand closed around mine for a moment, then she let go, her eyes shining but steady. The room came back slowly. People started talking again, but their voices had softened. The fire cracked in the hearth. Someone on the far side of the table told a story about a Thanksgiving long ago when the power had gone out and they had eaten by candlelight. Laughter rose again, but it carried a different weight now. I ate a small piece of the pie, the flavors as familiar as my own name. Cinnamon, pumpkin, a hint of clove. Underneath it all, the taste of work done with care, and not much else. The kind of thing no money could hurry or replace. For a moment I glanced at the chair beside me, and could almost see Sarah there, leaning in, listening, her eyes bright at the sound of our son's voice. The ache of it was sharp and soft at the same time. I held it, let it sit with me, did not push it away. Outside the windows, the sky had gone from pale to a deep blue-gray. A thin line of light still clung to the horizon above the lake. Inside, the candles burned low, their flames small but steady. I sat at that long table surrounded by glass and wood and quiet conversations, and felt the strange peace that comes when the world's usual scales stop mattering. My life was still simple. My truck would still wait for me in the farthest corner of the lot. A packet under the seat still asked questions about what came next. But here in this room with this pie, none of that was what defined me. I let my hand rest on the table, fingers relaxed, listening to the murmur of voices and the soft sounds of forks on plates. The warmth from the fire brushed against my sleeve. Claire's laughter floated gently from the other side of the table. Jason's profile caught the light in a way that looked for a brief second very much like his mother's. I breathed in slow and even and let the moment settle. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. The kind of quiet that settles after a long day, warm but weighty, like the air is waiting for you to breathe differently. I set my keys on the counter, hung up my coat, and walked into the living room. The lamp still cast its familiar circle of light across the rug. Something about the soft glow made me feel as if the night had left a door slightly open behind me, urging me to look back before I moved forward. My satchel rested where I had left it days before. The old envelope was still inside, edges worn thin paper, softened by time and handling. I picked it up again and sat in my chair. For a moment I just looked at it, wondering why I had carried it so long without opening it, wondering what part of me had needed it to stay sealed. When I slid the letter free, the paper trembled not from age, but from my own hands. The handwriting was uneven familiar in a way only human effort can be. I began to read. A woman wrote about a winter 20 years ago, a stack of bank papers that determined whether she and her husband could keep their home, and the fear she felt in a hospital room when she thought it might all fall apart. She thanked the mail carrier who delivered on Pine Hill Road for being on time that day. Because of that, she wrote, her husband spent his final days in the house he built, not in a place that would have felt like a stranger's room. My vision dimmed and then cleared again. I did not realize I had started to cry until a drop fell onto the paper. It was not grief exactly. It was something older, something that had been waiting for years to be recognized. I sat there holding the letter, feeling a warmth rise in my chest that was as steady as breath. I had thought I was invisible, walking the same routes day after day. It turned out people had been watching, just not the ones I expected. When I folded the letter and placed it beside Sarah's photograph, her smile seemed to meet it with quiet approval. I rested my fingers on the frame, then let the room settle around me. The next morning brought a clear, cold sky and a frost that clung to the edges of the porch. I was pouring coffee when a car pulled up outside. It was too polished for my street, and the engine quieted with a sound that did not belong to old sedans or work trucks. I stepped to the window and saw Richard getting out. His coat was simple today, his posture less certain, as if the night before had taken some of the sharpness off his edges. I opened the door before he reached it. He paused, surprised, then nodded as he stepped inside. "I hope this isn't a bad time," he said. "No," I answered. "Not at all." We sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs between us. He held his without drinking, turning it slowly in his hands, like he needed something to steady him. "I've been thinking about last night," he said. "More than I expected to." He glanced toward the window, then back at me. "I'm used to being the one who fills a room," he said. "But last night everything shifted, and it wasn't because of anything I brought. That pie of yours, the story behind it, the way Jason and Claire looked at you. I saw something I don't have, something I can't buy." His voice dropped slightly. "I've envied you for that. I didn't realize it until now." I watched him as he spoke, not because I needed his apology, but because he was giving it in a way that felt real. There was no performance in the way he looked at his hands, or in the pauses he let linger between his words. Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the open door. Jason stepped in, cheeks flushed from the cold. He looked from Richard to me, then set a folded envelope on the table. I recognized the format immediately. "This came to our place by mistake," he said. "The retirement notice." He rubbed the back of his neck uneasy. "I opened it before I knew it wasn't mine," he added. "I'm sorry about that. But I'm not sorry I saw what it was. I know you turned it down." I looked at him. His eyes held a kind of pride that was steady and uncomplicated. "You didn't quit," he said. "You didn't let them push you out because it was easier for them. That means something to me." The way he said it was soft, but it landed with more weight than anything he had said in years. I felt something in my chest shift, not a sudden change, but a release, like a knot that had loosened without warning. Later at breakfast, back at the lodge, the room was bright with cold sunlight. People gathered around the long table, settling into chairs, passing plates of eggs and toast. The mood was quieter than the night before, as if everyone sensed a different kind of day beginning. Richard stood when the room had settled. He cleared his throat once the sound, small but decisive. "I need to say something," he said. Conversations faded. Eyes lifted. "I've spoken carelessly in the past," he said. "I made it sound like Sam was someone who needed to be carried. I was wrong." He hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw something genuine. A man reconsidering himself in real time. "What I saw last night," he said, "was a family built on something real, something earned. I respect that more than I can say." He sat down. Silence held for a moment, not uncomfortable, just full. Later that week on my route, I saw Noah waiting near the edge of his yard. His hat was crooked, his coat unzipped. When I reached him, he threw his arms around me with a suddenness that nearly made me drop the bundle of mail. "Don't stop bringing the mail, Mr. Sam," he said into my coat. His voice was small and sure. I felt a laugh rise from somewhere deep, breaking free without effort, the first real one in years. I rested a hand gently on his back and told him I wasn't going anywhere just yet. As I walked on the street, looked familiar, but something in me had shifted. The cold air felt lighter. The satchel pressed against my shoulder with the same weight it always had, but it no longer carried the same silence. Sometimes acknowledgement arrives quietly, not from the places we expect, but from those that hold us without ever needing to say how. The morning carried a gentler quiet, the kind that settles after something inside you has finally shifted into place. Light drifted across the walls in soft strokes, pale and steady. I stood in the kitchen with a cup of coffee warming my hands, watching the faint steam rise. The world outside was still half frozen, the sky a muted blue, but something in me felt warmer than it had in a long time. Not loud or triumphant, just steady. By mid-afternoon, we were back at the lodge. The driveway shimmered with a thin layer of frost, and the trees along the path bent slightly in the cold air. Inside, the heat from the fireplace welcomed us again, but the atmosphere had changed. The room felt softer, quieter. No one seemed in a hurry to impress anyone else. Conversations drifted like gentle currents. Even the light coming through the tall windows looked different, as if the glass remembered the night before and had softened its edges. I took my seat at the long table the same place as last time, but the feeling was not the same. I watched Jason adjust a placemat for Claire, watched Noah swing his legs under the chair, watched Richard set down a glass of water with a touch of hesitation. The space between us no longer felt strained. It felt like everyone had taken a small step toward one another without saying it out loud. As we settled, Richard stood. He placed both hands on the back of his chair for a moment, drawing in a breath, as if searching for the right place to begin. He glanced at me, then at the others, and whatever he had carried in his chest seemed to soften. "I owe Sam something." He said, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. His gaze dropped for a moment, not out of shame, but out of the weight of what he needed to say. When he lifted it again, the room stayed still. He spoke about the words he had thrown carelessly in the past, about assumptions he had made, about a lifetime spent thinking influence meant worth. He said he had watched the night before unfold, and realized he had misunderstood the measure of a man for far too long. His voice wavered once, not enough to feel dramatic, just enough to feel human. When he finished, he dipped his head a little, an instinctive gesture, small but sincere. It held more truth than any speech he could have rehearsed. Jason moved toward me then. He placed a hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. Claire came beside him, slipping her arm through his, and leaned in just close enough to let me feel the weight of her presence. "You're the one who keeps this family steady," Jason said. It was only a line, but the air around it shifted. Old comparisons, old hurts, old distances that had built themselves quietly over the years, all loosened with that single truth spoken out loud. I felt the word settle in me like a long-delayed breath finally released. When I stepped outside a little later to take a phone call, the cold swept around me with sharp clarity. It was the post office. A new hire had left abruptly, and they were asking if I could return for a while, help them get through the holiday season. It was not a promotion, not a victory, not a miracle. It was simply a place that wanted me back at the very moment I felt ready to stand there again. I told them I would come in on Monday. When I walked back into the lodge, Richard looked at me with a knowing expression, as if he had sensed something shifting before I could speak it. Jason smiled in a quiet way that said more than congratulations ever could. Claire gave a small nod, a gesture of recognition and pride. It was enough. Later in the day, when the sun had begun to slip low behind the trees, I drove to the quiet street where Mrs. Henderson lived. Her porch light was off, the curtains pulled. I knocked gently. A woman answered, her face lined with the lingering weight of grief, but her eyes were kind. She told me her mother had passed a few days earlier. She said there was something her mother had left for me. She handed me a small envelope, thin and light. I stepped back onto the porch before opening it. The winter air wrapped around me as I unfolded the note. Mr. Grant kept this street standing. 8 words written in a faint hand that must have taken effort. I held the paper carefully, letting the message settle. It was not loud, not grand, not dramatic, just true. And sometimes truth is the only form of acknowledgement a man needs. I thanked her and walked back to my truck. For a moment I remained standing beside the door, looking down the length of the street. Snow clung to the edges of the roofs. A soft light glowed from a window across the way. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, muffled by the cold. The world continued its small movements, each one carrying a quiet kind of significance. I drove toward the lake afterward, letting the road take me there without much thought. The water lay still beneath the gray sky, a single sheet of muted silver stretching to the far trees. I stepped out and felt the cold bite at my cheeks. My breath rose in pale clouds, fading upward into the air like wisps of smoke. I walked closer to the edge of the lake and stood there listening to the soft hum of wind sliding over the frozen surface. For a long while, I thought of Sarah. I could almost see her beside me the way she stood near the water in late autumn, her coat pulled tight, her gaze fixed on the shifting light on the lake. The memory came without pain this time, just a quiet ache that felt like gratitude. I let it stay with me the way you hold a warm object in your hands on a cold day. The wind eased, the sky dimmed one shade deeper. A single star broke through the clouds, faint but steady. I stood watching it until the cold began to settle into my coat. People had compared me to a man with wealth influence and a life built of polished things. They had measured what could be bought and counted it as worth. But worth is quieter than that. It shows up in envelopes long forgotten, in apologies whispered with hesitation, in the arms of a child who believes in you, in the warmth of a memory that refuses to fade. That Thanksgiving, I did not prove anything loud. I simply lived the truth I had carried all along the kind people overlook until the moment they need it most. I turned from the lake and let my breath rise once more into the cold, watching it disappear into the wide open air. Then I stepped back toward the road feeling lighter with each piece of frozen ground beneath my feet.